My hands still remember the feel of a foal's first steps, steady in those wobbly legs that would someday carry champions. For 40 years, I built Galloway stables from nothing but red Oklahoma dirt and stubborn dreams. Every splinter, every midnight birth, every impossible comeback race, my sweat paid for it all. When my son Trevor was born, I knew I'd found my legacy. I taught that boy everything. How to gentle a stallion, read bloodlines, negotiate with oil-rich buyers who wouldn't know good horseflesh if it kicked them. By his 30s, Trevor was the face of our $8 million empire, while I happily worked behind the scenes, the old man who still mucked stalls because nobody does it right. 3 months ago, at the Kentucky Derby reception where our prize colt took second, Trevor introduced me to the board as our stable manager, not founder, not father, just another employee. 2 weeks later, security walked me off my own property. My severance package? The handmade rockin' horse I carved for Trevor when he was 4. Yesterday, I learned what he's been hiding all these years and why he needed me gone. Now I have a choice to make that will shatter everything we built. I wasn't born into horses, I was born into debt. My father worked the oil rigs outside Tulsa, coming home with blackened hands and a temper that flared like the refinery flames on the horizon. Mom kept our trailer spotless, as if cleanliness might somehow elevate us beyond our station. Galloways don't beg, and we don't quit, she'd say, scrubbing floors raw while Dad drank away his back pain. When I was 9, old man Hutchins down the road paid me $5 a week to exercise his quarter horses. Those Saturday mornings became my salvation. Horses didn't care that my jeans were patched or that my accent marked me as trailer trash. They only cared about how your hands spoke to them, how your heart steadied theirs. My senior year, Dad caught me hiding college brochures for equine management programs. "Horses are for rich men and fools," he spat, tearing them to pieces. "You think you're better than us now?" That night, I packed a duffel bag and left with $87 to my name. I worked every backwater track and breeding operation across 3 states, sleeping in stables and learning from old-timers who recognized my hunger. By 25, I had saved enough to lease 10 acres and take in 2 neglected mares. Galloway stables began with a tin-roofed shed and second-hand equipment, but those first foals we produced turned heads at regional shows. I met Diane at a quarter horse auction in 1987. She was tallying sales for her father's farm. Education and pedigree in every graceful movement. I had no business approaching someone like her, but horses make gamblers of us all. 6 months later, we married beneath the oak tree on what was now 40 acres of Galloway land. Her father offered us money. I refused it, too proud to take a handout. Trevor came along in 1990, born during the worst drought Oklahoma had seen in decades. I held that red-faced, squalling boy and promised him something my father never gave me, a legacy built by our own hands. When he was 4, I spent 3 months of evenings carving him a rockin' horse from oak harvested on our expanding property. I detailed every muscle, every vein in that wooden horse, even matched the markings to our first stallion. Trevor rode that thing until the rockers wore thin. As our operation grew, so did the divide between Diane and me. She wanted Trevor in private schools, summer camps with the children of our wealthy clients. I wanted him in the stables, learning the business from the ground up like I had. He needs to know struggle, I'd insist. Struggle is what builds character. He needs options, she'd counter, options you never had. The compromise was both. Prep school during the year, summers working every job on the farm. By 15, Trevor could evaluate bloodlines better than brokers twice his age. By 18, he was commanding respect at auctions where I was still seen as the upstart with dirt under his nails. What no one saw, What I refused to see was how Trevor absorbed Diane's family's sense of entitlement along with my drive. While I wore my calluses with pride, Trevor wore custom boots and Rolex watches, gifts from his maternal grandfather. Presentation matters, he'd explain when I questioned the extravagance. Clients expect a certain image. When Diane left us for a real estate developer in 2010, I threw myself into expanding the business. We added a state-of-the-art reproductive center, began experimenting with embryo transfers to multiply our best bloodlines. Trevor graduated from Cornell with dual degrees in business and equine science, bringing modern techniques and connections I could never access. The secret started small, just a disagreement about breeding direction. Trevor wanted to shift toward European warm blood crosses, following market trends. I insisted on maintaining our quarter horse foundation, the sturdy American bloodlines that built our reputation. We're Oklahoma horsemen, I'd remind him, not European aristocrats playing at dressage. What I didn't know then was that Trevor had already begun negotiations with foreign investors, people who saw our operation not as a family legacy, but as an untapped resource ripe for expansion. The grand gesture came on my 65th birthday, Trevor announcing he was naming our new training facility after me, with a bronze plaque bearing my likeness at the entrance. I was so proud, so blind to what was happening behind corporate doors bearing the Galloway name I had built letter by letter, horse by horse. The annual Galloway Spring Showcase had grown from a modest open house to a major industry event. This year marked our 30th anniversary, with buyers flying in from Dubai, Germany, and Japan. Trevor had transformed our working farm into something from a magazine spread. White tents with crystal chandeliers, waitstaff in black tie, champagne flowing like water. I stood at the entrance in the new suit Trevor had insisted I buy, feeling like an imposter in my own skin. "Just smile and shake hands, Dad," Trevor directed, straightening my tie. "Let me handle the presentations and negotiations." "I know how to talk horses," I muttered, bristling at being managed on my own property. "These aren't just horse people anymore," Trevor sighed. "These are investors who expect sophistication. Just try not to tell that story about birthing the breech foal during the tornado. It doesn't translate well to international clients." The first sting came when I overheard Hank Pearson, my oldest client and fishing buddy, asking Trevor about succession plans as they admired our new yearlings. "Your father built something remarkable," Hank said, "but at his age, buyers want assurance about stability." "We're well positioned for the transition," Trevor replied smoothly. "Dad's stepping back from daily operations this year, taking on more of an emeritus role." I nearly choked on my iced tea. This was the first I'd heard of any emeritus role. Just that morning, I'd been discussing expansion plans for our therapy program with our veterinarian. As the day progressed, the slights accumulated like storm clouds. Trevor introduced our head trainer as the architect of our breeding program, a program I had charted course by course for decades. When a Saudi prince inquired about our foundation bloodlines, Trevor stepped in before I could answer, redirecting the conversation toward our newer European imports. The tension crystallized during the auction portion of the event. Our prized 2-year-old filly, Galloway's Midnight Dream, a horse I had personally matched the bloodlines for, had delivered myself during a freak April ice storm, was the showcase item. I had planned to describe her lineage, the 4 generations of careful breeding that had produced her exceptional conformation and temperament. Instead, Trevor took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we present our premier offering, I'd like to take a moment to honor the man who started it all. My father, Jack Galloway, built this operation from nothing through sheer determination and old-fashioned hard work." The crowd applauded as Trevor gestured for me to stand. My chest swelled despite my irritation. Finally, some recognition. Dad represents the foundation that allowed us to evolve into the modern, international operation you see today. His traditional approaches gave us roots that have allowed us to grow beyond what he could have imagined 30 years ago. The applause continued, but something sour twisted in my gut. The speech felt like a retirement party I hadn't agreed to attend. In fact, Trevor continued, I'm pleased to announce that Galloway Stables is entering a new chapter. We've finalized partnerships with Westbrook International and the Alfayez Group to expand our operation globally, with new facilities breaking ground in Kentucky and Germany next month. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. I stood frozen, blood rushing in my ears. Not one word of these partnerships had been shared with me. My own son had sold pieces of our family legacy without so much as a conversation. After the announcement, Trevor was swarmed by well-wishers and potential partners. I retreated to the barn, seeking comfort in the honest smell of hay and horse. I found myself in Midnight Dream's stall, running my hands over her gleaming coat. "She's stunning," came a voice from behind me. I turned to find Eliza Winthorpe, a sharp-eyed equine attorney who had handled some contracts for us years ago before Trevor brought in his own legal team. "Your bloodlines always did produce the best temperaments." "Didn't know you were in town," I said, grateful for a familiar face. "Your son didn't invite me," she replied with a dry smile. "I represent the Kowalskis, who are interested in your therapy program horses. Jack, have you seen the partnership agreement Trevor's circulating?" My silence answered her question. "You might want to take a look. Trevor's listed as sole owner with founding rights. Your name appears only in the historical section." The revelation hit like a physical blow. "That's not possible. We're equal partners on every document. I made sure of it when he came on board." Eliza's expression softened with something too close to pity. "The new corporation was formed 6 months ago. It acquired all assets from the original Galloway Stables partnership. Did you sign anything recently? Perhaps something Trevor said was routine, tax-related." Memory flashed. A stack of papers Trevor had brought by during March Madness, the basketball game blaring as I signed where he pointed. "Just restructuring to save on insurance costs," he'd explained between plays. The betrayal was so complete it left me breathless. 30 years of sweat equity, of missed vacations and back-breaking work, signed away during a basketball game. I was still reeling when Trevor found me an hour later. "There you are. The Japanese delegation is asking about our reproductive protocols. I need you to come charm them with your folksy expertise." His tone was light but condescending, as if I were a trained pony being trotted out for show. "We need to talk about these partnerships," I said quietly, aware of staff moving nearby. "And about the corporate restructuring you neglected to mention." Trevor's smile tightened. "Not now, Dad. We have guests. We can discuss operational details tomorrow." "Operational details?" My voice rose despite my efforts. "You sold my company out from under me." "Our company," Trevor corrected smoothly, "which needed to evolve beyond one man's vision. Look, the transition plan gives you a generous consulting income for life. You'll never have to worry about money, and you can still visit the horses whenever you want." Visit? The word felt like acid. Visit my own life's work? "Dad, you're making a scene," Trevor hissed, glancing toward the tents where music and laughter continued. "We can discuss this tomorrow in my office, 9 a.m. sharp." It was the sharp that did it, the tone one uses with subordinates, not fathers, not founders. "I'll be there," I said finally, a calm settling over me that I didn't entirely understand, with my lawyer. I never made it to that 9 a.m. meeting. At 8:30, security guards I didn't recognize approached me at the stallion barn.
A young man with a corporate badge explained that my access had been temporarily restricted pending resolution of management concerns. They escorted me to the main gate, where Trevor waited beside his Range Rover, a manila envelope in hand. "This is unnecessary," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You forced my hand with your behavior yesterday." My behavior? The words barely escaped my constricted throat. I built every inch of this place while you were still riding that wooden horse. "And I'm grateful," Trevor replied with practiced sincerity. "But gratitude doesn't justify allowing outdated methods to hold us back. The board voted unanimously for this transition." "What board? Since when does Galloway Stables have a board?" "Galloway International has had a board of directors since the restructuring." He held out the envelope. "Everything's here. Severance agreement, lifetime stipend details, non-disclosure requirements. The lawyers have made it very fair." I didn't take the envelope. "Non-disclosure? You want to pay me to pretend I wasn't robbed?" Trevor sighed, the sound of a man burdened by an unreasonable elder. "Nobody's robbing you, Dad. You're just being asked to step aside gracefully and let the operation you started reach its full potential. Your methods belong to another era." Through the gates, I could see the gleaming facilities I had built, barn by barn, fence post by fence post. The corner where I'd taught Trevor to lunge his first pony. The oak tree where we'd buried his childhood dog.
"At least let me say goodbye to the horses," I said, hating the pleading in my voice. "That's not advisable right now. We'll arrange a visit once things settle." Trevor checked his watch. "I have investors waiting. The car will take you home." Home. Not the foreman's house on the property where I'd lived for 20 years, but the condo in Tulsa that Trevor had purchased last year as my retirement gift, a gift I now recognized as the first step in easing me out. "My personal items," I began. "Already packed and delivered to the condo," Trevor interrupted, nodding toward a black SUV idling nearby, "including something special I thought you might want to keep." The driver opened the trunk, revealing cardboard boxes and, incongruously, the oak rocking horse I had carved for Trevor decades ago. The sight of it, worn smooth by years of play, now discarded like trash, broke something fundamental inside me. 3 weeks passed in a fog of betrayal and disbelief. I consulted attorneys who confirmed the worst. The paperwork I'd blindly signed had been airtight. I'd legally transferred everything to the new corporation for a pittance. My only recourse would involve proving fraud, a lengthy and uncertain process. Then came the Bluegrass Stakes in Kentucky, where Galloway's rising empire, a colt I'd personally selected the breeding pair for, was favored to win. I hadn't planned to attend, but something pulled me there, perhaps the need to see firsthand what had become of my legacy. I purchased a general admission ticket like any stranger and positioned myself near the paddock. The Galloway contingent arrived in force, Trevor in his tailored suit, surrounded by the new international partners. They moved like royalty through the crowd, champagne flutes in hand. Rising Empire won by 3 lengths, a testament to bloodlines I had cultivated over decades. As cameras flashed and reporters gathered, I pushed through the crowd toward the winner's circle. Trevor spotted me first, his smile faltering momentarily before recovering. "Dad, wonderful surprise! Come, join the photo." His words were welcoming, his eyes warning me to behave. The microphones were already recording when I reached them. Trevor was mid-speech. "A culmination of our new breeding direction at Galloway International." "New direction?" I interrupted, my voice carrying clearly. "That colt comes from bloodlines I established 20 years ago, before you were old enough to distinguish a fetlock from a forelock." An uncomfortable silence fell. Trevor laughed tightly.
Ladies and gentlemen, my father, Jack Galloway, the original founder of what has become our global operation. Dad's traditional approaches laid the groundwork for our current success. Traditional approaches, I echoed, blood pounding in my ears. Is that what we're calling it now? Not the expertise you stole? Not the legacy you erased? The cameras swiveled toward me. Trevor's smile became rigid. Dad, this isn't the place. When is the place, Trevor? Your security guards won't let me on my own property. Your lawyers won't return my calls. So here we are. One of the partners, a silver-haired man with a European accent, stepped forward. Perhaps we should continue the celebrations privately. Oh, I'm sure you'd prefer that, I said, past caring about appearances. Has my son told you about the breeding records he destroyed? About the experimental line he terminated because it didn't fit his corporate image, even though it produced the most disease-resistant foals we'd ever developed? Trevor's face drained of color. That's absolutely false. Dad's confused. I'm not confused. I'm finally seeing clearly. Tell them about the laboratory reports, Trevor. Tell them what you've been hiding. The gathered crowd had grown silent, sensing drama beyond the usual victory celebration. My son didn't restructure our company because my methods were outdated, I announced, looking directly into the nearest camera. He did it because I discovered he's been altering bloodline registrations, falsifying genetic testing. 3 of your miracle sires tested positive for HYPP, a genetic muscle disease Trevor's been concealing to protect their stud fees. Gasps rippled through the gathering. In the horse world, there were few accusations more serious than bloodline fraud. That's a damnable lie, Trevor hissed, grabbing my arm. Security, please remove him. I shook free of his grip. The Western Quarter Horse Association has copies of the original lab reports. I sent them myself the day before you had me escorted off the property.
They're reopening investigations into 6 of your top earners. The European partner was already stepping away, murmuring to an assistant. Other investors followed suit, creating distance between themselves and the unfolding scandal. You've just destroyed everything, Trevor said, his voice barely audible. Including yourself. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing familiar features. No, I said finally. I just did what you taught me was unthinkable. I chose truth over the Galloway name. As security approached, I turned and walked away, leaving chaos erupting behind me. For the first time in months, despite everything lost, my steps felt unburdened. The fallout was immediate and merciless. By nightfall, racing forums were ablaze with speculation. By morning, the Western Quarter Horse Association had issued a formal statement confirming receipt of concerning documentation regarding Galloway International bloodlines and announcing a comprehensive investigation. I returned to my Tulsa condo to find 3 voicemails from Trevor. The first threatening legal action for defamation. The second offering negotiation. The third pleading for me to fix this before we both lose everything. I deleted them all. What I didn't expect was the knock on my door 2 days later. Eliza Winthorpe stood in the hallway, leather portfolio in hand. Your son's made some powerful enemies, she said without preamble, and they're looking for allies. Over coffee at my kitchen table, she laid out the situation. The foreign investors were initiating fraud claims. The breeding associations were freezing Galloway International's registrations pending investigation, and several long-term clients had already pulled their horses from the training program. They're circling Trevor like sharks, she explained, but they need someone with insider knowledge to strengthen their position. I didn't do this for revenge, I said, though the words tasted hollow even to me. No, Eliza raised an eyebrow. Then why did you choose a nationally televised race to drop your bombshell? You could have gone quietly to the authorities. The truth was uncomfortable.
Some part of me had wanted Trevor to suffer publicly as I had, to feel the humiliation of being discredited in front of his peers. Regardless of motivation, Eliza continued, you're now positioned to salvage something from this wreckage. The Alphaeus Group is particularly interested in establishing a new operation focusing on the therapeutic breeding program Trevor was planning to discontinue. They'd want you at the helm. Working for the people who helped my son push me out? They claim Trevor misrepresented your role in the restructuring. Whether that's true or damage control doesn't really matter. What matters is they recognize your value now. I stared at the wooden rocking horse I'd placed in my living room corner, a reminder of both love and betrayal. I need time to think. That evening, an unexpected visitor arrived. Hannah Grayson, our former stable manager, who had resigned shortly after my departure. She brought with her a thumb drive and a story that shifted everything. Trevor didn't start the genetic testing manipulation, she said, perched uneasily on my sofa. He inherited it. The thumb drive contained records dating back 15 years to when Diane was still actively involved in the business. Your wife began altering test results after Midnight Star showed positive for HYPP, Hannah explained. She knew that stallion was your pride and joy, and that the diagnosis would devastate both his value and you. She thought she was protecting you. That's impossible, I protested. Diane wouldn't. She did, Hannah interrupted gently. And when Trevor discovered it after she left, he was faced with an impossible choice. Expose the fraud and potentially destroy the business, or continue the deception to protect what you'd built. The revelation staggered me. Had I been so obsessed with bloodlines and reputation that my own wife felt unable to tell me the truth? Had my rigidity backed my son into an ethical corner from the beginning? Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because Trevor's not a monster, Hannah replied. Ambitious, yes. Ruthless in business, absolutely. But he didn't set out to betray you. He made compromises that snowballed, just like his mother did. Just like you did when you signed papers without reading them because you trusted family above all else. The next week brought further complications. The condo doorman called to inform me that a delivery had arrived, too large for the elevator. In the parking garage, I found Trevor supervising the unloading of a horse trailer.
Inside stood Midnight Dream, the filly from our showcase. She's not caught up in the registration controversy, Trevor said, not quite meeting my eyes. Her bloodlines are clean. I thought maybe you'd want her. I live in a condo, Trevor. The Alphaeus Group offered stable space at their local property. I called them myself. He handed me the filly's registration papers. She's officially yours, not the company's. I studied my son's face, searching for the manipulative angle. Instead, I found exhaustion and something that might have been remorse. Why? I asked simply. Because you were right, Trevor replied, his voice rough. Not about how I handled things, that was business, and I stand by it. But you were right about the breeding integrity. We're facing massive lawsuits, registration revocations. The international expansion is dead in the water. And this is supposed to make amends? No, Trevor shook his head. Nothing makes amends for family betrayal. I learned that from you, watching how you never forgave Mom for leaving. He patted the filly's neck. This isn't atonement, it's acknowledgement. You have horseman's hands. They shouldn't be empty. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I kept the rocking horse all these years because it was the one thing you made that wasn't about business or legacy. It was just love. The statement hit harder than any accusation could have. In the months that followed, life reconfigured itself in unexpected ways. The Alphaeus Group did indeed court me for their therapeutic riding venture, offering a position that would utilize my breeding expertise without the administrative burdens I'd grown to hate. I negotiated for creative control and a clean start, no Galloway name attached. Midnight Dream took up residence at their property outside Tulsa, where I visited daily. Working with her
focusing on a single horse rather than an empire, reconnected me to the joy that had started my journey 50 years earlier. Trevor's legal troubles mounted, then eventually settled into a new reality. Galloway International survived in diminished form, with stringent oversight from breeding associations and a complete restructuring of management. Trevor retained control but lost the international partnerships that had driven his ambition. The wooden rocking horse remained in my living room, a reminder more complex than simple betrayal. One afternoon, I found myself taking sandpaper to its worn surface, then applying fresh oil to the wood. The restoration was therapeutic, each stroke an examination of where pride had hardened into inflexibility, where my own rigid standards had created impossible choices for those I loved. 6 months after Kentucky, Trevor called with an unexpected proposition. "The therapy program," he said without preamble, "it's never going to be profitable enough for our shareholders, but it's valuable work. I'm thinking of spinning it off as a separate nonprofit entity." "And," I prompted, hearing the unspoken continuation, "and I thought maybe you'd consider coming on as the breeding director. No administrative role, no corporate politics, just doing what you do best, matching bloodlines for temperament and soundness." "Under you?" The question came automatically, pride still bristling. "Alongside me," Trevor corrected. "Different entities, collaborative relationship. You'd answer to a separate board." The proposal was elegant in its simplicity, a way for both of us to preserve what mattered without the power struggle that had poisoned our relationship. "I'll think about it," I said, neither accepting nor rejecting. That evening, I sat beside Midnight Dream's stall, watching her doze in the Oklahoma twilight. The filly, my filly, represented both what I had lost and what remained possible. Her bloodlines carried forward the best of what I had created, unburdened by the mistakes of the past. I took out my pocket knife and began carving a small piece of oak I'd brought with me, the beginning of a miniature rocking horse. Not a replica of Trevor's, but something new, something that acknowledged the past without being imprisoned by it. As I worked, an unexpected peace settled over me. Empires rise and fall. Bloodlines strengthen or weaken with each generation. But the simple pleasure of working with my hands, of creating something that might outlast my own complicated legacy, that remained constant. Today, the Galloway Therapeutic Riding Center sits on 30 acres, adjacent to what remains of Galloway International. I oversee a breeding program focused on horses with the temperament and soundness needed for working with disabled children and veterans with PTSD.
Trevor runs his operation with a new corporate efficiency I'll never fully understand or embrace. We meet weekly to discuss breeding selections and occasional collaborations. Our conversations are professional, sometimes strained, but healing in their own careful way. The wooden rocking horse I carved for him sits in his office. The miniature one I made after Kentucky sits in mine. Silent witnesses to a legacy reimagined rather than destroyed. I've learned that building something worthwhile isn't about ownership or control. It's about creating value that outlasts your own hands. My name isn't on the buildings anymore, but it lives in the steady gaits of horses helping wounded warriors find their strength again, in the genetic lines that will continue long after I'm gone. As for that $8 million empire, it turns out empires are poor substitutes for relationships. What matters isn't what you build, but who you build it with and why. If this story resonates with you, consider how your own legacy might be measured not in dollars or property, but in impact and connection. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of family, redemption, and the unexpected paths that lead us home. Sometimes the greatest triumph isn't in what we create, but in what we're willing to release.